Hello, everyone. Welcome to IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Joel Ward, and with me is Zach Snyder. Zach, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Just working through the week, getting ready for everything that's coming.
Awesome, awesome. So, Zach, I like to do, especially with new guests, I would like you to just give me a little background about yourself.
Yeah. Let's see what kind of background I could give you. Just about anything. So, since today we're talking about tech, I guess I'll just focus on that. So, I went to college outside of Philadelphia at the University of Valley Forge, and that's really the first place that I started to get into technology and production. Like I had done some art and some photography leading up to that, but it wasn't until I got to college that I really started to become passionate about using media production for ministry. Because ministry isn't, I guess, traditionally super technological. But when I went to college, me and my buddies just kind of realized that, hey, there's a lot of potential for tech and creativity to be used not just for ministry support, but as, a form of ministry, reaching people through technology. So in college, I had a lot of cool opportunities. I was able to, direct and run camera for multiple big Christian music events. I interned in the Philippines with the media production company there. Went to India, all kind of stuff. A lot of really cool opportunities that kind of really just paved the way for what I'm doing now. So now I'm at Lifehouse Church, which my parents actually helped start in the very beginning. So when I came back from
Hmm.
college, there was a lot of back and forth. I had a couple opportunities to do some part time work, and then that door opened real quick, and then we just hopped right into it. We joke a lot that in ministry, it's kind of like you hop in and you're like treading water and you're just trying to get your feet, and then suddenly they throw a couple babies at you, and you just got to kind of carry all these different things as you're managing five, six, seven different things. But it's a lot of fun. You get used to it. You develop a lot of ministry grit, and then really that's my primary job right now. And then last year, right at the beginning of COVID, me and my college buddies, we started a ministry for church creatives called Black Bar. So we hopped in right before COVID, and quite frankly, we've seen in this past year a lot of the really like fine nuanced things of not just how COVID is impacting our church, because me and my buddies were at decently large churches compared to a lot of places, but there's a lot of small churches that were hit and impacted in largely negative ways because of COVID. So that's kind of where I am now. Just volunteering basically at Black Bar, and then full time ministry at Lifehouse Church. So
Awesome, awesome. That is really cool. And I know we've had a chance to talk about your podcast and your business that you're doing. I think it's really cool. Now, Zach, I know you gave me a tour and something. I go to the same church Zach goes to. For those who don't know, but Zach, you gave me a tour of the behind the scenes of how Lifehouse operates, the live stream, their studio, all that stuff. And even though Lifehouse is a bigger church, there are churches out there that use your service, Black Bar Media, and they use it to help them grow their member base and stuff. So tell my listeners a little bit more about how you help churches do that.
yeah, so I mean, I think churches in general, especially the past, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, really have started to get on board this idea that church can happen outside of one physical location. And there's been a lot of churches that have done it. Like you see, like an Elevation Church or a Life Church, who have been doing this for a while. They have a very large staff. They have a pretty big budget. They're able
Hmm.
to afford a lot of this kind of stuff. But when it comes to like medium to small kind of churches, live streaming, being on social media, marketing, those are kind of terms that are a little bit more, I would say, foreign. At Black Bar, we've kind of talked about three types of church media strategies. One is the traditionalist, one is the innovative, or sorry, one is the adapter, and then the final one is the innovator. So the innovator is the one like the elevations that have been doing this for a long time. They're front of the line, they're doing the things that they could fail on, but if they succeed, it goes really well. The traditionalists on the opposite end of the spectrum are like super traditional churches. They don't have a social media presence. They
Hmm.
don't see the value of having, cameras in the room or a decent sound mixing board. And then I think the largest percentage of churches is right in the middle, the adapters. They're moving away from traditionalism. They're looking ahead to innovation, and then they're just trying to adapt what they're doing and get online. And that's a lot of what we saw. All these churches that are just like, either I have this shoestring budget or I already have this technology. How can I use either of those situations to be in the online space? And the weird thing about church online,
Mhm.
a lot of people experienced, is that it's I'd say it's unknown, which makes it a little bit scary and intimidating. And like with COVID, we saw a lot of people that were talking so much about, all right, I'm done with Zoom meetings. Can we just stop doing Zoom meetings? Like people got digital fatigue. So churches, I think, experienced that in a form too. Uh, but that kind of proposes this: if we're going to exist online beyond an emergency setup like COVID, then we have to be intentional about what being online means. We can't just put a camera in the back of the room and then show people what we see without engaging with them, without connecting with them. And I think that's a lot of the conversations we've been having in Black Bar and even at Lifehouse. Like we're right in the middle of changing the way we do some of our live stream stuff. So I mean, TBD on that. But there's a lot of potential for what church online could look like once you start to be okay with the reality that, hey, can church be online? I absolutely think it can. Our team does as well. So it's kind of requires this big shift, and that shift kind of could mean just about anything depending on what direction you take once you transition out of it.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, were watching online, and I was watching online because we couldn't do physical services, and I will say it was a paradigm shift. Like it was hard, but there was a shift, and it sucks because a lot of people, a lot of generational divide between people that go to church, but a lot of them were upset that churches were online. But
Sure.
I will say, being online, they have been able to reach, like, I didn't even think Patrick mentioned this, or Pastor Patrick mentioned this one Sundays. There's so many people that you can reach online that don't go in your area, that aren't in your area, that go to church. So thinking about that, like, I think he said there was people overseas even watching Lifehouse online. So it,
Mhm.
you know coming from that perspective, so you've seen a shift. So does that mean that all these churches are getting more attendance as far as online views? Have you seen that, or is that something you can talk about?
Yeah. So this is kind of an interesting topic because it could go a couple different ways. Again, looking back at the three types of church media strategies, there's a lot of people who are like traditionalist churches who they just couldn't meet and they just did the bare minimum to get by. And we're seeing a lot of those churches saying, now that we're able to open back up, now that COVID laws are kind of loosening, now that we can do more social distancing, now that like all these different, regardless of where you stand on the issue, a lot of churches are like, it worked for a season, we're done with it. And those
Hmm.
churches, well, really any churches, I think it comes down to what's your organization's objective. Like what is the pastor's objective? What is the calling for your church? If if you want to be online and you were not before COVID, I think it requires a big, like you said, a paradigm shift.
Hmm.
You have to decide that we're going to invest the time, effort, and even budget into making sure that online is doable. Because the reality is online is still another ministry. And
Hmm.
let's just say any business or any organization, you add a new department, it's still going to require investment to do well, right? If you add a department and you're just like, I think we want to do this, and you don't really invest into them, then it makes it difficult for that department to grow. So I think if you're online, like the first thing, if you're online and you want to stay online and grow online, you have to shift the way you're thinking. Now, as far as numbers,
Hmm.
that was a big trouble and even struggle this past year for a lot of places because Facebook tends to inflate what your actual viewership is. So you kind of have to navigate different things within that. Even like, Instagram, really a lot of social media statistics have value, but they can also be really fickle if you don't know what you're looking for. And
Hmm.
as far as, man, just as far as people trying to exist and grow, we saw a massive spike. Most places probably saw a massive spike right at the beginning of everything. That was like probably this this endorphin high as we were like, oh my gosh, there's people from Albania watching and there's people from Spain watching. And we have like triple our number. But then you look at like 5 weeks later and people are getting tired of it. And then suddenly you've dipped super low. And I think a lot of
Hmm.
churches have kind of seen this huge high, this huge low. I think right now in this season, we're seeing kind of like we're going to plateau out for a bit, a lot of churches. And then those that embrace online and start to innovate and do new things for the church, those are the ones that are going to see a slow return on numbers. And then that's probably the third thing. is that it's not a like, virality is a big deal. Everyone wants to get TikTok famous or Instagram famous or Vine famous whenever we had it. I guess MySpace had a viral nature to it. I don't know, I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've been on MySpace. I don't know about you. Um, but
I never had MySpace, so yeah, I don't know.
but yeah, there's this component of outside of, like, doing something that's viral, virality is, like, unsustainable. It's a short-term burst, and unless you're producing content that can align with that, it's kind of a hit or miss. So as far as, like, long-term sustainability and growth, it's exactly that. It's a long-term, sustainable effort in a direction that eventually yields growth. And one of our culture pieces here at Lifehouse is health over growth. And that's the idea that you can't force growth. If you have a baby and you want it to grow, you can't just sit there and yell at it and say, "Grow." You have to feed it. You have to, take care of it. You have to give it water
Mhm,
and sustenance and give it the ability to grow. And when it's healthy, growth is a natural result. The same exact thing happens for online. When you make your online healthy, when it's sustainable, when there's people that feel like they can connect digitally, that's when you're going to start to see this upswing of like, okay, people actually know I can come here and belong. Because I think at the end of the day, that's what church, I guess, growth comes down to. Do people feel like they're belonging to a
mhm,
community? I like the concept of people want to belong long before they believe. And that's kind of this idea that non-believers can exist in a church, can enjoy church community, and then eventually a lot of them will take a long time to get to the place where they decide they want to believe. I don't know exactly who your audience is, but at least for the
mhm,
Christian church, that's kind of like it, we want authenticity and we want connection and we want community, and online does too. So if you're able to provide those things health in a healthy way over a long amount of time, I think that's what the growth is coming from, really.
yeah. So, um, the seeing all that and what so seeing all that shift now our online churches that we it's technically considered its own entity, I would consider. But online churches, how many, how big is your operation? How many have you gotten started? Like, how many have you helped get this movement going? Because I consider it a movement. Because right now, online churches. Like, I even talked to friends of mine who go to different churches, and they were like, "Oh yeah, our church had to get online quick because people wanted to hear it, but we couldn't hear it because it wasn't at in-person services." So they were telling me like we had to get online and we had to get resources. So I think what my question is how many well, first off, my first question is how many people have you gotten set up? Second question is there a team? Do you have to help establish a team to do these live streams to get this started?
Sure. Yeah. So that yeah, let's take those one at a time because especially the second one can be really, really big question depending on where you take it. So as far as the initial one, kind of like how many have been helped. As far as Lifehouse goes, we really try to make sure that we resource churches and like our content in a lot of ways. We say is if a church wants it and
Mhm,
we're unified and we're connected, like they can have it. And there's a lot of churches that asked us how to do things. We helped a couple churches record some stuff. We helped a couple people get set up technically. So as far as Lifehouse goes, while that's not our predominant purpose, we were able to still do that specifically during the COVID season. As far as Black Bar goes, um, Black Bar is essentially kind of like a three-headed entity right now. There's a weekly video on YouTube that we put out, so like a YouTube video that helps all kind of different conversations. There's the podcast, again, spans all kind of different conversations, and then we have a Discord. So Discord is like really an online Facebook, kind of like Slack almost. Less social media, more community engagement type of deal. So we
okay.
created Discord, and we were fortunate enough to kind of have maybe a mini virality on one of our videos. Like one of our videos hit like 200,000 views, and it just
Oh
so happened
wow.
like it was basically how to live stream 5 ways to live stream fast and easy, something along those lines. And I that kind of like just pinged on everyone's search charts. And a lot of people saw that in the rest of our content and they came to our Discord and praised the Lord because we had some people that were basically volunteers we had never met before say, "Hey, how can we help you guys in an official capacity? How can we volunteer our time to help your community?" And Caleb, Nick, and I are the originators of Black Bar. And quite frankly, none of us are really technical guys. I don't think any of us had really had extensive experience setting up a live stream before. Like, we have technical people in our lives for that. And fortunately, we had a slew of guys we called the certified pros, about 12 of them, come into the Discord. And by like accumulated efforts and investment, like we probably helped a couple hundred churches in the past year alone, like either refine their live stream or get online or even start to ask the questions of is my church meant to do online church, right?
Mhm.
And that's probably been one of the coolest things for our team, is that by simply creating a space and an atmosphere and maybe an ideology of there's value in what we do, we were able to attract people who resonated with that, and then who were just ready to give up their spare time to help people get online in ways
Mhm.
that, frankly, Caleb, Nick, and I could have never sustained. So that's been a cool, kind of the cool, uh, full circle thing for question one. So as far as question two goes, what is required for a team to stream? So, yeah, this in a lot of ways is very difficult because a lot of churches, especially small churches, don't really have enough budget to do like a media team. They don't have enough
Mhm.
budget to buy what an elevation church is. And for those who don't know what elevation church is, it's a massive church, probably 12 to 15 campuses. They stream every single weekend, like probably thousands and thousands and thousands of viewers every single. I don't have any statistics, but they're one of the biggest churches in the game right now, quite frankly.
Mhm.
And it's really easy to look at an elevation church and then look at my one camera setup at a small church and be like, man, what I'm doing is terrible. That's a problem, and that's a reality that especially church creatives and technicians face, is like it could be really quickly becoming a comparison game. So I think what's the most sustainable is probably the route that I would take, back to the health over growth thing. What is the most healthy and sustainable thing that you can do in your church? And oftentimes it's going to be volunteers. Oftentimes it's going to be kids who know how to stream on Twitch, or like someone who's in IT that enjoys like fiddling with cameras. Whatever the case, I think your church has to decide again what's the investment that is required, and then compare that with what's the investment we're able to give. And that's just a hard balance. Some churches, like Lifehouse, has been blessed enough that we have a solid team to do what we're doing. We have a 5 camera setup on our weekend services. We're streaming 2 to 3 times every weekend. Our tech team has a bunch of volunteers, but then also Ridge, who's our tech director, like kind of leads and champions that team. Jason is hugely helpful for our tech support. Lindsay, she leads a lot of the production and lighting components. In a way, we've kind of been blessed in a way that a lot of churches aren't. So there's the reality that we're probably, I would guess, middle line. So you could have much larger teams and you could have way smaller teams. Black Bar in general kind of attracted the
Mhm.
smaller communities, the smaller teams, and those are the lot of the people that we've helped. And as far as like, you know when you're volunteering at anything, that's the hardest part, to generate new people, right? Because if someone's going to give up their time, it's gotta be worth it to them. So if you're in a small church, you're looking to
Mhm.
grow your team, you gotta form relationships, you gotta form connections, and then also you gotta keep, like, the why of why you're doing what you're doing in front of everyone. Like, if our team didn't know why they're running cameras, or why they're pushing buttons with lyrics on them, or why they're launching videos, or why they're, changing the lights, like, then it could be really easy, really quickly to become work, and it could drain people, and it could burn out people. And that is definitely a reality that we see in, I would say, especially in the creative field, artists, musicians, technicians. It's really easy for us to get um so overworked that our passion becomes overloaded by the expectations that are upon us, whether placed upon by ourselves or the leaders above us. And
Mhm.
burnout's all too unfortunately a reality. There's a lot of, I think, a lot of people that came to the Discord were on one hand looking for this tech help, and on the other hand saying, "Listen, I am tired. This last year has drained me, and all the expectations have drained me." And I think one of the things that we're just saying is like, we get it, like we understand that's the reality of the position, and that's why being healthy is so important. And unfortunately, sometimes you got to have a pandemic to realize if you're healthy or not. But
Right.
I'm hopeful for, what's to come for church media production. I think this is well, last year, I think in a lot of ways was one of the biggest digital communication shifts, at least in my lifetime, because like literally every church all around the world had this kind of shared traumatic experience where they had to put their efforts in the same way. And, you know, I think the churches that got a taste for it and don't like it are going to move away from it. But the churches that got a taste for it and are very excited and there's a fire burning inside them to like
Mhm.
innovate, like I can't wait to see what church looks like in 15 years. Like we recently talked about how there's a virtual reality, virtual 3D headset church. Like they literally have put a 3D camera in like the front row of their church. You put a headset on and a VR headset, and you can look around and there's like people to your left and people to your right, and I mean, I don't know if the people are the same every week or not, but it kind of feels like you're there, even though you're only digitally there. And I've never had any experience with that, but like just the
Wow.
fact that
Yeah.
people come up with like let's take a 3D camera, which is pretty new technology. Let's take a VR headset, which is pretty new technology. Let's place it into our church. And then those who don't feel comfortable being here but have the technology to be present, suddenly there they are sitting in the front row, a fully immersive experience. And I think that we'll see a lot more of that in the years to come. Um, in a way, I know COVID was difficult for people in a lot of ways, especially those that experienced loss. So we've talked a lot about the silver linings. Like, what are the silver linings that through this difficulty that we're seeing kind of emerge, And I think that's one of them that we'll continue to see people that are like, digital church is possible. We just have to go about it the right way, you know? So
Yeah. So I actually talked, I think twice in two episodes, I talked about content creation and how it is so easy. And this is just diving into what you're saying is so easy to obtain and start like a podcast, an online store, or even online business or a videography company or a photography business, all with your phone and online resources, which has become so readily available since the pandemic. So with that being said, I'm sure you've seen that like all these resources and apps and stuff have become very readily available for this stuff. Zoom and Google Meets and live streaming itself, different apps and ways of doing it, and cameras, 3D cameras are just, it may have been hard to get a hold of some of these things, but content creation has been on the rise since the pandemic. And this is the kind of off key to what we're talking about, but I'm sure you've realized that content creation has gotten insanely obtainable in the last year since the pandemic. And even me, like starting this podcast, like it was like easy to do because all I had to do was buy a mic and or use my phone and get a webcam, and that was it. I mean, it's so easy. So starting off of that, and kind of like a question is, have you noticed that with this live streaming thing, have you seen a shift towards more churches doing it? As obtain as a pair as a I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say is like as far as like more churches trying to get into the space as far as creating content for their viewers, like not just the live stream, not just live stream. I'm talking about like online resources for their campuses and stuff, or even just their building if they're one church. Have you seen more of that happening?
yeah, for sure. I mean, initially, I like what you were saying, just kind of like a throwback to how easy it is to create content. We saw that with TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kids are going viral that are, they're probably making more money than I am dancing in front of a camera, or they're quick witted, and I think it's cool to see that in a lot of ways, media creation is being democratized. So it's a lot easier and a lot more accessible for people. It's more affordable. DSLR cameras, production cameras, you can make high quality, like Netflix level content. Like Netflix recently lowered the accepted type of video footage to DSLRs, which you can pay like maybe $2,000 for. The fact that that is now accessible to you and me, just a random person off the street that has a passion for it, is mind blowing. Now, there's other expectations and production qualities that are expected there, but it's easier than it ever has been before to do so. And as far as churches go, that is again, I think, I think we're at the beginning of this large curve where people are understanding what it means to create content for people online. Like, I think we've seen there's a lot of cool examples all around the country of churches who are creating movies or short films or super engaging social media posts, or even like there are youth groups in churches
Mhm.
using TikTok and the platform, that kind of stuff. And I think again, it's a wave. You see the wave of the innovators doing it first. The biggest thing about innovators is that they're
Mhm.
risking a lot to potentially fail. But when they succeed, they succeed really well. And then the innovators have kind of
Mhm.
paved the path. Now the adapters are finally catching up and saying, we can do this. And then also, how can we make it uh, into enough of a template to replicate it in a steady way? Because that's we want to be able to replicate something that's working and sustain it over a long period of time.
Mhm.
That's a natural practice that makes sense. I think what people are gonna have to understand is that not everything works for everything. And by what I mean for that is, like, if you go onto YouTube, if you go onto TikTok and you wanna create a video, like, you wanna just say, "I'm about to do this, this, and this," and it's lame, or it doesn't fit the culture, people on that site are gonna they know the culture that they're in. They're gonna boo you out right away, and what works for TikTok doesn't necessarily work for YouTube. What works for YouTube doesn't necessarily work for, Facebook, and then Instagram, and then Twitter. Like, each of them are their own cultures, and in a way, like, I think a lot of churches have to get on board with understanding that you're hopping online to a bunch of different cultures. And I mean, we've kind of coined the term black bar, this idea of a digital missionary. I think generally know people know what missionaries are, where they go around the world, they raise a bunch of money, or they get support to go and care for people of another nation, and bring the gospel to them. Now, as far as like the digital missionary concept, it's this idea that, like, just like a missionary traveling to another nation, in a lot of ways, getting online, you're adapting to a new culture, and then you kind of have to, in
Mhm.
a lot of ways, play by that culture's rules. So, like Facebook, I know, in a couple of the episodes back, you talked about censorship, and you talked about how that's becoming a real thing. But there are missionaries overseas who live in like China who are always censored all the time, and yet they're thriving.
Mhm.
So in a lot of ways, it's like we have to go into the spaces knowing that if I believe about what I'm doing as much as I do, that I have to learn the culture, I have to speak, breathe, and eat the culture. But that doesn't mean that I have to be so absorbed by the culture that I lose my vision or my calling. Rather,
Mhm.
it's saying, "Hey, I can actually help people find more hope on TikTok, and I can do that myself." And we I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago as well on our podcast. People are realizing that they don't have to have this massive organization behind them to create this content. They just have to have people who know what they're doing.
Mhm.
And the TikTok, again, going back to TikTok creators, these are kids that are saying, "I found a niche." Wow, I just totally forgot how to pronounce that word. But I I found
It's alright, it's alright.
thing that I want to do, and I'm gonna lean into it because it is working. And that
Mhm.
specification really helps people, you know, be successful. And I think churches just have to learn that it's a process. A lot of churches that hopped on live stream were expecting instant success. They were expecting instant progress. And for those that didn't experience it, they're discouraged and they're frustrated, which is normal. It's natural. But I kind of like what you were saying. Like, you have to learn how to create content in a way that's acceptable, even though it's easier than ever to do it. You still have to put in the hours, the discipline, the focus, the marketing to make sure that it is successful, you know?
Yeah, and it is very obtainable. And but you're right. I in my content creation thing, I was talking about how it is so obtainable, but you've got to be constant with it. Like, when I did this podcast, I was like, I'm pumping out an episode a day, and that I have to be disciplined with that because I have to spend time doing it. And you have to market yourself, and you have to brand yourself, and make sure you're like on top of your game, because it's 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 about, and what I talked about, and I think me and Nick, my buddy Nick, has talked about on the podcast before, is you have to constantly be coming up with new content. And then that's so true for churches. You can't just be doing the same thing. You have to be coming up with new things. And what makes these TikTokers so successful? And I dogged some of the TikTokers. I was like, some of these young kids are just like making some stupid videos. whereas other people are making some really good content. But that's the thing, if you're not coming up with good content, and that's the thing we talked about in going back to another episode, a Netflix episode, the reason why Netflix has gotten so many users in the last month or so, or last couple months, is because they're coming up with their own content, original content, and something new and something fresh. And that's what you have to do even in the church scene. Like, you cannot just have the same stale content, because it's not going to draw people. And that's where it's like in podcasts and stuff, you have to have like new content. So um going back to what your thing is like you're helping people get the way, learning how to do that and how to get fresh content. And I think that's awesome. How what you're doing at Black Bar. I know we're at our 30-minute mark, and I don't want to cut you off because there's so much I'm sure you got left to say. But is there a little, give my users a little bit, if they're a church out there and they're listening, and there's someone like interested in getting a hold of you, is there ways to get a hold of you, like on Facebook or YouTube or wherever?
Yeah, I mean, so you can join our Discord. I mean, we're Black Bar on Discord. We're also Black Bar on YouTube. You know, I could give you some links if you'd like. It's
Okay.
spelled BLKBAR. We took out most of the vowels, not all of them, but just enough to make it current and modern. Yeah, so we have an Instagram, a Facebook, a YouTube, a Discord, and then really you can listen to the Black Bar podcast just about anywhere you get podcasts. We're all over the place, so feel free to check us out. We've only been around for about a year. We just had our
Mhm.
birthday in January, so not an excessive amount of content, but enough to keep you around for a bit. And we've got big plans for the future. Of course, we're only ultimately at the end of the day, we're still only a team of three that are creating content, so only so much we can do on top of a vocational job. But
Hey.
we are loving it, and we'll
Yeah.
continue to turn out stuff as much as we can. So.
Well, I'm glad you came on the show. I was actually so looking forward to today's episode, just because I there's so much that we didn't get to talk about in our video call, and I just wanted to hear more about what was going on. And this way, not only I could learn things, but my viewers can learn things. So, Zach, thank you for joining me, and you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, man, you as well. Thanks, dude.
You're welcome.